Thank you very much, everyone, for coming to this edition of the Monday Majlis. And well, I have very bad news for those who think that scholars are boring. And the bad news is that we have Parvaneh with us today, and Parvaneh is the antithesis of this thought. So she is a loving friend and a great scholar, but she is really scholarly passion incarnated, and I adore that in her. And yes, so she is one of those of us from whom this passion wasn't killed off by professionalism. And we will I'm pretty sure we will enjoy the consequences of that today. Before we start her introduction and her talk, I'd like we have a really forensic start of the term, so I'd like to advertise our two next meetings, which one will be on Wednesday, which is Hafsa's talk on Kashmir, colonizing Kashmir, very different. And then Yusha Patel will talk to us on how to think about Muslim difference. Incidentally, they are both from the same institution, which is completely accidental. So please register immediately, and then see you also there. And one more thing, I don't want to waste out anyone's time from Parvaneh's talk, but I'd like to mention, you saw that in the advert that she is directing this center, and we have the great news that we are starting a collaboration between our centers, because she organized some wonderful events. I hope. Well, we're organizing this one, which will be so it's good to share the work we have and advertise works, and then so for the benefit of everyone. All right, I stop speaking and start listening.
Okay, Esteban, the rule is that I start talking about myself. Is that it? Yes. Okay. All right. So I came to the States in before the revolution, 1977, and that was the time when the dollar was 7 tumans, not 50,000 tumans, right? And then so I went to the American Language Institute for 1 semester because I was late for registering. So anyway, I started there at NYU, and then like a year and a half into my studies, the revolution happened. So my parents started sending 2 of my brothers to us. So there were 3 of us. I give you my age now. I was 18, and my brothers were even younger. I'm the oldest. So anyway, all the 3 of us, we had to start working in order to manage things because money stopped coming from Iran, and we had to start working at a young age, all of us. All through NYU, I did that. Through Columbia, I did that. So I had come to NYU because my father was a well-established journalist. I came to NYU to study journalism. So I sat on the first class of journalism, and one of our first, and I saw that there are typewriters all over the class, and there were, of course, students who knew how to type, and I had no idea how to type on the typewriter at the time. And anyway, one of the first assignments was to go and make an assignment on I don't think it was Halloween, it was Thanksgiving or something. And I had just come, I was totally not acculturated, but, I was coming from a secular family and everything. So anyway, going through NYU, so I changed to sociology. So it was very hard to go through NYU and get my diploma, actually, because I ended up, getting permissions. This is for the sake of the students who I'm giving all this for the sake of students. So anyway, so it was very hard to finally get my diploma from NYU, and from NYU, I decided that, okay, this is not going to work. I don't want to study sociology. The revolution had happened just then, and I was wondering, what has happened to my country, because as far as I was concerned, I was coming from the Shah's regime. I mean, everything was secular, totally hunky-dory as far as my family was concerned, and so I started. I went to talk to Dick Willett, and I said, "Yeah, I want to do history, sociological history." And he said, "There is no such a thing. Why don't you do social history?" So I started with Dick Willett and started doing social history. And again, I was taking 1 or 2 courses at a time. I was keeping the like very little money that I had. I was saving it, and to pay for tuition. And then lo and behold, I got a fellowship at Columbia. And anyway, so Dick was very kind, and we got a lot of funding through my schooling. And then I went on the job market, and the job market, well, I started getting all rejections and whatnot, and then finally I got a couple of fellowships, SSRC and AAUW, and I went to Turkey, Istanbul, for 6 months, and I studied Ottoman Turkish there. At Columbia, I did my Arabic, and I had French, so I got those languages there, and then and I'm getting some Dutch, of course, and because my husband is Dutch, so going through school was extremely hard, and of course at Columbia we had fun, but we had also a lot of hardship. I mean, me personally, for the times that I didn't get fellowship, so, and then so I got 2 SSRC and AAUW grants. I went to Istanbul, and for 6 months there. Then I came, and over there at Istanbul, I started looking into the Abū Muslim Nāmeh. Now, I had written my dissertation with Dick Willett. Dick had told me that why don't you, because he knew that I do urban history pretty well. So he said, why don't you do the social history of Tus to Mashhad? How did Tus turn into Mashhad? So I started working on Tus. Excuse me. I started working on the topic, and then I saw that instead of going forward, I'm going backward. And I started because this persona of this Kanorang of Tus was appearing in both the Futuh literature and in the Shahnameh and Khudaynameh tradition. He was also appearing. So I had this personage from 2 different perspectives, one from the perspective of the Sasanian kings, and one from the perspective of the Islamic narrative of events 2-3 centuries after the fact. And I was very intrigued with that, and I was very, very lucky that Dick allowed me to do whatever I wanted. And so I went back and I wrote, and my dissertation ended up being the Arab settlement in Khorasan and Iranian tradition in Tus. So that's how I got to work first on Khorasan and then the Khudai Nāmeh tradition in Tus. And it was very, very incredible, very interesting for myself that Professor Khalaqi Mutlaq had said that we don't know why Tus became the center of the Shahnameh production, because, you know, other places had also, you know, Balkh, we had Muayyad Balkhi and other Khudai Nāmeh traditions. But and as you know, the Khudai Nāmeh tradition went also into the Islamic, so-called Islamic historiography. So so anyway, so I wrote my dissertation. It got the second prize from the Foundation for Iranian Studies, but I was very happy about that. And then before going on my sort of trip to Istanbul and whatnot for research, where I studied Abū Muslim Nāmeh at the manuscripts in various libraries, but yeah, in various libraries, the name of which has been a long time. Anyway, the manuscript tradition, I studied that and I found manuscripts, and I haven't gone back to it since, yeah. Because what happened, then I started teaching at Fordham, one term, Fordham, and my husband was away. I had meanwhile married to Hans, who was a mathematician, and that was very hard time, because once I finished, there was no job prospects, because I finished in September. There was no job prospects, and anyway, luckily I got this these two grants. And I came back and I substituted for my dear friend Catherine Babayan at University of Michigan for a year. And then I went to University of Massachusetts Amherst for a year. And then Dick Davis basically asked me to apply to Ohio State University. So at that time I had, you know, my dissertation and one article to my name. But they accepted me. Yeah. And yeah, well, it was very, I mean, they really wanted me to, yeah, let's put it this way. But anyway, I don't want to go into the gruesome details of it, but looking back as a woman, as an Iranian woman, as a woman who's not afraid of being the only one who's saying something in front of a crowd, who has other things, believes otherwise, you know, that also created a bunch of problems for me. But, you know, Ohio State was very, very nice for me, because we had a quarter semester, and we could do it such that you would take one quarter off, and along with the summer you had basically 6 months of research. So that's how I wrote actually my book, which was inspired by the dissertation, but included very little of the dissertation. The dissertation, I made some, in the meanwhile, I made some articles out of it on Arab settlement, on local histories, and so on and so forth. Then I started working on my dissertation at Columbia to make it into a book. And from step one, I decided that I want to go in depth and see what the Khudai Nāmeh tradition has to say about this Kanorang of Tus. Now, the Khudai Nāmeh tradition, of course, all of you realize and know this, is not just one tradition, right? it is a number of tradition. I mean, the one that comes in Ṭabarī is different from Ferdowsi, is different from Tarikh Balkh. It's different from Farsnameh, it's different from Ṭabarī, and so on and so forth. So later on, I was able to figure out where the sources of these various traditions are coming from. So, and in the middle of my work, I started reading the Shahnameh, especially the Sasanian and the Sasanian version part of it, and the Khudaynamed traditions. Excuse me. So then, and then I looked at the Shahnameh and I saw that, you know, for up to say Yazdagerd the First, basically very little information is given, but from Yazdagerd the First onward, Yazdagerd the accursed onward, I saw that, you know, the Khudaynamed tradition has gained some meat, so to speak. And then I looked through the narratives of various Khudaynamed traditions, and I saw that you know, the Sasanian kings actually come out not that pretty. And Dick Davis, my my chair at the time, and my colleague, was had written already this book called Epic of Sedition on the Khudaynamed tradition, and then and he basically decided that that's the case as well. It is the kings are actually not that that, you know, held up so high, but what the seditioners did. So I started gathering information of these figures who were very, very instrumental in Sasanian kingship. And you know, I kind of figured out that part of them are I mean, I figured out the names and everything, but I didn't know that they are actually Parthian. Yeah. And then I was in Paris for a while, and I talked to Rika Geisler. And Rika had just published her 4 generals of the Sasanian period, sort of booklets on the sigillography of Sasanian kings. But amongst these, there was the sort of more this sigillography of these figures on whose, you know, basically coins or whatever you call it, it was written Pahlav and Parsi. And I'm like, what Pahlav? You know, Parthians during the Sasanian period. So, you know, I went back and looked back at my sources again. And then I saw that, yeah, in fact, the sources, when they're talking about at the end of the Sasanian period, that, you know, basically the end of the Sasanian period, they start talking, the Arabic sources, they talk about Pahlav and Ahl Fars. And you know, then I figured that, okay, these figures are themselves, they are Parthian figures. So from the Qurans, we knew already, the Surans, we knew already, and here we are in, I don't know whether you're seeing my shared, okay. So are you seeing my screen? Okay, so we knew the Surans in the southeast in Sistan, from where the basically the tradition of the Sistani tradition comes out from Rostam and his families. And my former student and now colleague Shaki has written an excellent book on those. Yeah. And so we knew about the Surens, we knew about the Karens, we knew about Mehrans, we knew something about, and the Ispahudan we knew something about. But then I came across the figure that I came across in the Futuh literature and the Khudai Nameh tradition on the end of the Sasanian rule, i.e. The time that Yazdigerd is fleeing and, basically comes from Nehawand and goes, I'm sorry, basically comes from Nehawand and goes to Sistan, where he stays for a while, Yazdigerd. And then there is these Kanorangian here, this figure, this family, that ended up being sort of scions, like together with the Esbahudan, connected family connections, and they were basically in Khorasan region, in the greater Khorasan region. So anyway, so I came across this, and then then came my book, right? Then came my book, and where I argued that the Parthian dynasts, and some of my research has been taken very, very well by colleagues. Some of it has become controversial, and that's fine. It creates more it has created more scholarship, I think. I hope. Anyway, so that was the trajectory of my life. Yeah. Basically, I went to Ohio State. I was at Ohio State for basically 14 years, and then there was there was a search in a very Ivy League sort of institution. I got shortlisted. I was one of the 3, and it didn't work out. But then it became very, very controversial, and because of that and a whole other host of issues, I transferred myself with my tenure. 4 years past my tenure, well, more than 6 years past my tenure. I transferred myself to the CUNY system, to where my husband had been teaching mathematics for a long time, the City University of New York, City College of New York, New York City College of Technology, to be correct. Well, for me, of course, but Hans went there when there was no research. He was, a big fish in the pond, and I mean, when I went, basically, I mean, basically, it was kind of this a little bit the same thing. So the coming to City Tech, the good thing about it was that after 14 years of long distancing with Hans, I could finally sort of be with my husband, because for 14 years we had been long distancing, from New York to Columbus every 10 days. So there was the money was also very okay, and at OSU, I won't tell you how much I was making, because it was very, very low, and well, you know, faculty that were coming in were getting almost close to twice as much as me, yeah, and almost twice as much, you know, 1.5 times more as I. And I didn't know that. My very dear colleague, Snezhana Buzov, who was teaching Ottoman history back then, she told me, Parvaneh, you know, I saw something and it was like a sort of like a fist to my stomach. I said, what? He said, did you know that your salary is this and otherwise? I said, no. So this was towards the end of my, it was not end, but towards the end of my stay at OSU. So I had quite a bit of, so I got quite upset with that, and I went to the dean, I think, and I managed to get my salary a little bit higher, but still less than everybody else. That's what you get for being, you know, a woman, I think, and Iranian women in academia, because anyway, my career path has been very hard. Let's put it this way. So, okay. So, but now I am almost happy. The one thing that I'm missing is graduate students, and I hope to have those in the graduate center, where I have started my activities. And, you know, meanwhile, I went to Princeton for a summer. I went to when I came to City Tech the next year, I was at ISA, Institute for Study of Ancient World. You know, I continued getting funding and so on and so forth. So my book, I was writing my book, and you know, I had a contract for it, and it was almost finished. So with that, I went for tenure at OSU, and they didn't give it to me. So they said, no, your book has not finished yet, and you know, you have to finish your book. And well, lo and behold, my book came out 6 months after that, right? And you know, again, I went to the dean, and again, he told me that there was a mistake. That was a mistake. That was not under me, and I'm going to correct that. Anyway, so I got my tenure finally the next year. And the book was the book that you saw. But in the book, as a result of the book, my prism, my perspective grew, because on the history of Iran grew, because I started putting it in the context of Western Asia. And by the way, I have told everyone again and again that I'm not using the concept of Middle East anymore, because I think it's okay. Some people are going to have their eyebrows up, but I think it's a very colonial concept, and I'm not using it. So anyway, I put Iran in the context of late antiquity of Western Asia, bringing in the mostly the Western part, not really the Eastern part, Byzantium, the Jews, and the Arabs. Excuse me. And excuse me. So so that and I got into, while I was researching, I remember in while I was researching for the book, I spent the whole summer reading on Mithraism. You know, when I went to Istanbul, I had worked on Abū Muslim Nāmeh, where there were ʿayyārs in chivalrous brotherhood. It was basically the narrative of the Abbasid revolution in a very popular form, and conducted by these figures who were ʿayyārs, yeah, the revolution, and usually coming from anyway, well, we forget about where they're coming from. So I got into ዐyyārs, I got into Mithraism, I got into you know, the history of Iranian Jews, on which I am writing a book. In late antiquity, I got you know, a pattern of Arab settlement and so on and so forth, all of that. And you know, my perspective grew. So I was going through these anyway. So what is my talk of today? Let me yeah, Stefan, I move into my talk.
Yeah, Parvaneh, you mentioned to me this. We are running late, so but you mentioned to me something very interesting, and if you are willing to talk about it now, is this gendered citation and plagiarism. Do you want to talk about it, or shall we save time for the talk?
Actually, I think it's a good opportunity because I know a lot of my colleagues, female colleagues, it's not just me at all. I know that a lot of my female colleagues are, you know, are terribly upset about this. I mean, it happens with male colleagues as well. I'm not saying that, yeah, but the way in which it happens with female colleagues is really appalling, and that is the fact that you don't get citation for the ideas that you have proposed. So your ideas are taken, but you don't get citation, and you know, very little, right? So and this is something I think that we should pay particular attention to, because what we're doing with that is that basically we are saying that our female scholars, you know, what they produce does not get the stamp of approval unless I sort of you know, I confirm it. Yeah. So so I know that this is a very bad problem for I mean, it is a problem for myself, it is a problem for a lot of my colleagues, but my other colleagues, excuse me, it has been talked about quite a while, but in Middle Eastern studies, so-called, we voice very little our opposition to this practice. So I hope that we can, I mean, actually we can create some kind of awareness, Esteban, about this. And yeah, that has been, because, you know, you work so hard, right? So hard for so long in order to come up with ideas. And you know, one of the reasons that I'm going to talk about this Mazdakite and Mithraists and ዐyyārs is that I have not had the opportunity to write it down. So now I find myself in a position where I have not written down, because I work extremely slowly. I am working on 2 books now, and you know, and I have, you know, lots of articles, including this one, that I don't get to write. So I talk about my work before it is published. But of course, that's another problem. But it is the way it is, you know. So I have been continuing doing that. Stefan, I think, yeah, you got the, yeah.
Yeah, I think this must be somehow that that's very interesting, and I assume it's not just female scholars, but also lower ranking junior colleagues, I assume they are less cited, like it was a shame to cite them, because how me, the big scholar, get the idea from a student, or from horrible edict from a woman. So that's well, yeah, I don't know the phenomenon, but find it alarming. Yeah.
Yeah, no, when I was writing my dissertation, Dick Bullitt, I was explaining to him, and Dick, look, the Arabs were settling in what is now Central Asia and to Khurasan, and not in inner Khurasan, what I call, not inside of Khurasan, and like Tusan Nishapur and whatnot, and I said, the topography of it, right? This is like whatever 20 years ago that I wrote my dissertation, and I was working on the topography of the Arab settlement, and I'm still continuing with that. A number of studies have come out, articles meanwhile, where I don't get any reference. But anyway, but because that was in my dissertation and people didn't know that, this is in my dissertation. Dick Bullitt told me about, why don't you consider it inner Khurasan and outer Khurasan, right? And I said, wow, that's smart. Typical of Bullitt, and that's what I called it. But I gave reference to Dick, that this is Dick Bullitt has come up with this conception, which is an extremely pertinent conception for the history of Iran in late antiquity, in the sense that, so I am also turning my dissertation into a prelude as well as a sequel, part sequel of the book. And in there, I have gone and worked more on the pattern of Arab settlement, and I have ideas about that. And in fact, as I suggested about trade and the locomotive that I think that is, I will never call Arab conquest Islamic conquest. And, I don't even know whether I can call it now Arab conquest or not, considering the literature that has come out. I forget the colleague who wrote on the Arabs recently, the name of the colleague who work. Anyway, so anyway, I am now more convinced that a great part of this locomotive of conquest was moved by the intention to trade, and by the intention, as they said in Arabs, they said in the Khudai Nāmeh tradition to Farrokhzad, the brother of Rostam Farrokh Hormuz. Rostam Farrokh Hormuz and Farrokhzad Farrokh Hormuz, the father of both of them is Farrokh Hormuz. It always, they still call it Rostam Farrokhzad, but anyway, that's wrong. Anyway, they had said to him that, okay, we want to go to Bazar Gas, right? And to do trade in the cities where they do trade. Okay, I mentioned that in my book, but it was not, it was maybe, I don't know how it was taken. I really don't know, because it was talked about in passing. But when the sequel that I'm writing will I think establish the fact that they were not, Arabs did not settle in inner Khurasan at all, but they settled in the Piedmont, frontier cities, right? Frontier cities, Piedmont cities in around, you know, the Binalud Mountains, Nisā, Nisā, Abivad, Sarax, and so on and so forth. And then in Marv, but then in Sogdiana and Tukharestan, right? Sogdiana and Tukharestan. Excuse me. And there was a good reason, and you know, I figured out that I forget the name of this colleague, that you know, the Azd, who were a trading community, trading tribe, were living actually in southern Iran for you know, from like 3rd century onward, for 3 centuries. And so they knew southern Iran. They knew that southern Iran from the Makran region. I don't have the map here, or maybe I do. Yes. So from the Makran region, right, you could really go to northwestern India, here, northwestern India, and engage the Indians. I mean, the trade of India, the riches of India, right? Because, you know, this is, the East was where everything was coming from, right? So, and you know, the Arabs, of course, they were not all Arabs in the sense of Bedouins, right? But they were serious merchants. One of the things that I figured out, for instance, is that not only the rightly guided caliphs were extremely rich, except for Omar, maybe, who was less rich than the others, but all the generals of the Arab armies, including, for instance, the Mohallabids, who were very, very important in the conquest of Khorasan and yeah, in the whole event of the Abbasid Revolution and what before the Abbasid Revolution and whatnot. The Mohallabids, for instance, were major tradesmen with interest, working not only in India, in northwestern India, but also in Khorasan, right? And the connection of the trade of China to India was also a very, very lucrative business, and that played also a part in, amongst other things, Abbasid Revolution. Okay, so that was the a little more of that. But anyway, so what I happened across is I was working on I worked very hard on Mithraists and Mithraism, Roman Mithraism. And I was reading and reading and reading, you know, Roman Mithraism. Okay. Roman Mithraism, as you know, was a secret organization, right? It was, yeah, a secret organization. There's a good word for it, but there's a different word for it. It escapes my mind. But of Mithraists, right? They had a version of Mithra, who was their primary god. And these were sort of chivalrous people. There are many different theories about what was Roman Mithraism all about. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. No, don't allow. Okay. Yes. I wonder whether I have my, yeah. And so they had what remains of Mithraism, I figured back then, is that there is this, a lot of archaeological remains, right? Mithraya, right? In these, and they go wherever the Roman army went, right? As far as England, right? And we know that we have Mithraea in England. But there are many from starting from Kumo, who argued for the Iranian sort of background to Mithra, in the I don't know, in 20th century, basically early 20th century. Then there was in the 1950s, things were still Iranian dimension of Roman Mithraism. Still, I think it was, seriously taken for granted, acknowledged. But then in the past few decades, there has been a backlash against this. So anyway, but I figured in the course of my research on Mithraism, I figured I was giving a talk on my chivalrous brotherhoods and sisterhoods at Ohio State, and a colleague of mine from classics department said, well, what you're talking about seems very much like the Mithraists. I was talking about ḥayyāri. And she said, it seems very much like the Mithraists associations. So that pushed me into Mithraism. That's how I got into Mithraism. And that's how I came. I saw that, okay, so ḥayyāri must have something to do with Mithraism, but I didn't know what. Yeah. So I started reading all about ḥayyārs, and then I came across this epic of Samak ḥayyār, and I read through it, and I saw that, in fact, I had done all my readings also on Mithraism by then, and I saw that that indeed this ḥayyāri phenomenon that we're talking about, that these ḥayyārs who I will talk about it a little bit. These ḥayyārs who later on became fatwa. They entered into fatwat and established the hierarchies of fatwat and all of that. And I realized that, yes, this is in fact the case, that these ḥayyārs are in fact Mithraists. So then I was, I have been working on the sequel and everything, and this is part of my talk, right? And I came across the Mazdakite uprising. Again, I got into the Mazdakites because I had not dealt with them closely in my book. So I got into the Mazdakites. And of course, I had read most of the literature. I reread some of the literature. Excuse me. And so with Mazdakites. So first of all, I had this background with Mazdakites that, there are these Parthian families that I showed you, that they're all over Iran. They're very, very strong. They have basically their own little kingdoms and all over Iran. And, the whole notion of centralization that people still hark upon. I mean, I have no, this is a modern phenomenon. This is post French Revolution. In fact, the very concept of centralization is a new coinage of 19th century, right? So pre-modern history of Iran, if anybody pre-early modern history of Iran, pre-Safavid, if anybody looks at it, it was always, you know, and after the Safavids, it became the same thing during the Qajar period until the Pahlavis came. It was also always, well, of course, there was a center, but there was a decentralized management of the country from, you know, by the population of various regions. So, so about the Mazdakites, I realized that there is, you know, first of all, there is almost 100 years of research on it, and so on and so forth. From, you know, from 1921 to Professor Doblois' sort of work in that came out in 2015, and if I'm not mistaken, some recently also, another one recently, and it has been worked upon, but still we don't know what the Mazdakites are, right? And still we didn't know what Roman Mithraism is until I came across Samak ʿayyār for myself, and I saw that what those working on Roman Mithraism always said, that the archaeology defies understanding. We have a lot of archaeology, but we have very little written literature, for good reason, because these were sort of secret societies, right? There was very little written about them until I came across Samak �ayyār, and I saw that, in fact, what the archaeology of Roman Mithraism does not explain, Samak �ayyār sort of explains the archaeology of Roman Mithraism. So, for instance, you know, we can explain this is a relic from one of the Mithraea. I forget which, at the front of one of the Mithraeas of in Europe. I think it's in. I don't know. I think it's in the East more, but I'm not sure about it. I forgot about it. So anyway, you start with a cup, which is the cup of wine, right? Which is qadah mardan, which is you, before you enter the Mithraea, and before you give your oath of allegiance to the padre who stands at the top of the Mithraic association, they have 7 levels. Roman Mithraism I'm talking about, but Iranian Mithraism, of course, has 7 levels, right? And we can explain these sort of mosaics in reference to my Samak �ayyār. So qadah mardan, or the cradle, is what you start with when you're giving either your oath of allegiance or where you are entering again into the Mithraea. So you drink wine, right? And then you I forget what this, yes, this is the korax, right? And with the staff and raven, but in Samak �ayyār, the raven is actually a rooster that gives the that basically at dawn, at sunrise, what does the rooster do? I don't know. He says, yes, whatever they say, I don't know. I don't know how to say it in English. Anyway, what does it do? What is the purpose of it? The purpose of it is that, look up, the sun is coming out, right? The sun that became later on the very symbol, of Mithraism, right? East and West, Sol Invictus, and in Latin for the Romans, and a lot of khurshīds and suns in the Iranian concept of it, and I'll talk about it a little bit more. So anyway, so yeah, so this is the Raven, and this is the Mithraim itself, right? And this is the grade of, okay, this is a wrong thing because we cannot read, right? You cannot actually read what it is. The bride. Okay, this is the bridegroom, right? One of the things with Roman Mithraism is that women were not allowed into it, although they are now doing research that says that women were part of it. But in Iranian Mithraism, women were part of the Mithraic association, but the issue was that they wanted to they had to be celibate, yeah, vis-a-vis their male partners. So they were within the same community. Men and women mingled, men and women drank wine, and so on and so forth. This is a very well Mithra and Antiochus from 62 BCE. But anyway, this is the third grade is Miles, right, which is your own ʿayyārs. They're soldiers, right? And if you look at the headgear there, right, and we look at, I'm sorry, oh sorry, I'm missing, no. Okay, here. So the little bag that you see here, and they have no idea what Roman Mithraism is, right? Those who have published on this, Samakaya, right? And the fact that but you see the little bag, you see the dagger, and you see the head, the hair, I mean the headgear, which is a rendition of this, sort of, yeah, a rendition of this. Anyway, and this is the the dagger or whatever, or yeah. So this is the level 3, which is your āyyārs, right? These are the people who seek justice. They believe in Mithras. They seek justice. They want to remedy the wrongs of the society. They want to, they steal from the rich. They give to the poor. They drink a lot. Okay, so hold that for now, right? Grade 4, right? Leo is Shirzan, and some of my friends have started calling me that, yes. And with a spade and a bolt of lightning and whatnot. But this Leo, which is a central part of Roman Mithraism, is also in Samaka āyyārs, the sign of a lady āyyār, right? And then this is the weighted grade 4. Oh, this is Persis, right? It's the Persians, and I don't know how this connects to the Persians. I don't know, but of course, Persians are, I don't know, in the novel might be the Khurshid Shah. And this is this is the 6th grade, right? Is the sun, and the rays of the sun, and the torch for the light, and a staff again, right? So that's the 6th level, which is sun. We have plenty of sun mentions, and in fact, the chief protagonist of Samaka āyyār, and a bit about that right now, interjecting. In Samaka āyyār, the plot of Samaka āyyār is the fact that Khurshid Shah, which is the Sun King, and he's in Syria, incidentally, right? one sees Mahpari of the East, who is in the East. Khurshid Shah is in the West. Mahpari is in the East. In other words, night where Mahpari is, and where Khurshid Shah is the sun. And so I think what Samak ʿayyār is giving us is this whole issue of a mythology, a cosmogenical mythology, mythology of a cosmogony, right? I mean, basically, of explaining day and night, and as Shaki said, Mitra already has a cosmogenical sort of dimension to it, for a lot of reasons, and I will cut it short. If during the question and answering, I might be able to answer that. But anyway, so here we have, right? So here you have a community that gathers together, that women and men, their secret societies, they have underground cities, they live in underground cities, they work together, they go in pursuit of justice together. Of course, we have also foul ʿayyārs, right? Those who go to the service of the enemy, right? They work together, they distribute wealth together, they live together, and they drink together. And in fact, they have parties where they get drunk. And one of the female ዐayyārs of this Samak ዐayyār says, I never leave a party unless I'm drunk, right? So, kind of like me. I like her. So anyway, so drinking was really, really a central part of these Mithraic associations, right? So I think some things might be falling into place for you, except the political circumstances. Okay, so I was supposed to read, and I haven't read. Yeah. So the political circumstances. The political circumstances is as follows. We are dealing with the end of Piruz's reign, where, as we know, a Qaranid army, besides all else, one of the major sort of forces against the Piruz's forces, who had made this folly of making war against Hephthalites even after they had made peace, and he had made an oath. So making an oath, qasam khordan, right, to keep the secret and not to divulge it to anybody else, but to make an oath in Mithraism. Basically, when any two parties, right, can make oaths of friendship, right? So you make an oath of friendship between a tribe and its leader. You make an oath of friendship between teacher and student, and so on and so on. Every level of society, all the social dimensions have you can enter into a contract. So if you read Piruz's saga in any of the Khudai Nāmeh traditions, this business of having an oath, and so anyway, he gave an oath, but he reneged the oath, and that's mer duruj par excellence, right? It's going against Mithra par excellence, right? You make an oath, you break it, and that's that for you. But okay, in the Khudai Nāmeh tradition, the hero that gets, and this is written without doubt by the Qaranids themselves, I will argue in one of my, if I have the time. So the Qaranid army is one of the major armies that goes, according to the Khudai Nāmeh traditions, that goes to the Hephthalites. And you know, Piruz has died at the hand of Hephthalites. His son Qubad is taken hostage, and his family and his treasury. So Khosrow goes. I'm sorry. This Sokhra goes and brings back Qawad, brings back the treasury, which is a lot, you know, and the booty, which is a lot, and comes back to Ctesiphon, right? And you know, in the meanwhile, he's deposing Belash and putting I forget yet another short-lived Sasanian king in front instead of Qubad. But then finally he puts Qubad in power, Sokhra, ostensibly in power. But Qubad is at the time, I argue, he's about 16 years old. There are two versions that we have of his age, but 16 years old is the one that perfectly fits the scenario that I'm giving you. So Qubad is ostensibly ruling, but in fact it is Sokhra, the Qaranid Sokhra, from the Parthian Qaranid Sokhra, that has all the power in the Sasanian Empire. He has the treasury, he has the army, he collects taxes, he collects armies, and you know, and it is as if the sources tell us Qubad has no say, and you know, he's a person of no importance. So he becomes 21. You know, there's a difference in tradition: 5 years or 10 years. 5 years later, because that also fits the chronology. Because if you get Qubad is 640. Okay, I'm sorry, 480. 486, I believe, and two. Okay, in the 490s, before 502, that Qubad starts his war against the Byzantines, where he has gotten powerful and whatnot, right? This Mazdakite revolution happens, right? So in Mazdakite revolution, as far as I'm concerned, it happens. I'm not giving you the exact dates right now, but it happens in. Okay, let's see whether I can. But let's put it this way: around 490, late 490s, right? The Mazdakite revolution happens, and what happens is that the entourage of Qubad, now that he is ostensibly 21 years old, or and you know, he's full of the pride of the youth, right? And he says, I have to deal with this Qubad. They come and tell him, why don't you deal with him? And he says that, well, because I don't have an army to deal with him. And then they say, okay, we have Shapur Razi, who is from Ray. Shapur Razi, who's from Ray and who's a Mehran, right? So the Karen's household was originally in Nahavand. It's a long story, but later on becomes also Gorgon, because Khosrow, you know, anyway, I don't get into the details of that. So these are the Mehrans, and the Karans at this point are in Nahavand, but of course they're controlling all over Iran. They're taking taxes from all these families and armies when they want to go to war, and so on and so forth. And Sokhra is in control of it all. So when they asked Qubad, what's with you? You know, you have no power. He says, they say, what's with you? Why aren't you doing anything? And he says, listen, I don't have an army. And they say, no, of course you have this army of Shapur Razi from the Mehrans. Now the Mehrans, their name is in it, right? The Mehrans are Mithraists. right? I mean, I really believe in these theophoric names, right? And some people don't, that's their privilege, but I really believe that. But anyway, it's Ray, it's all of this northern Khorasan, from Khorasan to Azerbaijan is Mithraic territories. We see this in the rebellion of Babak, Khurramdin, about which a lot has been said, okay, but it is a Mithraic revolt, Babak Khurramdin, and with Windengren was actually right, but I don't get into that. All of this is Mithraic territory, and of course you add to it. Anyway, Mithraism was, along with Zoroastrianism and Manichaeism, and yeah, these were the three major sort of branches, major branches, or maybe if you consider Zorvanism, a sect, which was not according to Shaki. And these are mainly three branches, let's say. Let's not call it sect, yeah. But I believe they're sectarian. The Mithraists, the Mithra that they worshipped was outside the pantheon of Zoroastrian Yazatas. But anyway, that's a different story. So they call the Mehrans, and I tell you that dating, I will give it to you in question and answering. I have the dating down very clearly. And Mehran comes and gathers some of the, because everybody else is now under the tutelage of the Khurramdins, right? And this was the dynamic of the Sasanian kingship anyway, that the king was always had the support of some of these families against the others, right? For instance, the Surens were always with them. Anyway, Mehran unleashes the army, and the army that he unleashes, and this is the Pahlav Parthian Dodborsmer from House of Karen. This is the on which it says Pahlav, right? And there are other sealings. Anyway, and this is Sohra, and this is an illustration from, this is real, this is unreal, but I mean, it's imagined. Okay, so the Mehrans unleashed their army, and I argue that the army that they unleash is actually a Mithraic army, right? Because if you look at the I have two. I think if I'm running late, I will stop there after this, Esteban. But so what the army that the Mehrans unleash is actually an army, but also an ʿayyār army, including the ʿayyārs, right? Well, and of course, the ʿayyārs live in communes, they drink wine together, they live together, they are constantly merrymaking. Remember Khurramdins, there's a reason why you call them Khurramdins, right? The continuity of the Mazdakites, right? And then later on, this same ʿayyāri phenomenon continues. Well, at least it appears in the Abū Muslim Nāmeh, which is unlike the Samaka ʿayyār, which traces itself to the third century, second, third century CE, right? So many years after the death of Prophet, it mentions, right? Again, I have the dates figured out. I don't have the thing. The presence of mind for that. But this same ʿayyāri continues into the ʿayyārs of Abū Muslim Nāmeh, right? The same, except for the drinking part, of course. The same phenomena appears in the Abū Muslim Nāmeh, which were, unlike Samaka ʿayyār, that traces itself to an ancient period, basically the around the Parthian period, if you will, right? But was written down. It was an oral, it was never written down, right? And finally, it was written down at a time when it was not sacrilegious to write it down, right? Yeah. So this one was Samak ዐayyār is written in the Selçukid period, early Selçukid period, 11th century. The earliest version of Abū Muslim Nāmeh that we have belong to the 13th centuries, and the Abū Muslim Nāmeh actually appear everywhere. You have the Ottoman Turkish version of it, you have the Urdu version of it, and of course you have the Persian version of it. But so one of the things that confirmed for me that Samak ዐayyār was in fact it was in fact a exposition of the practice and praxis and beliefs of the ʿayyārs, was this picture that my very good colleague Roxana Zenhari provided for me, which I didn't have. And this actually is a rendition, I argue for you, of Ṭabarī, of Samak, who by now has become Ala Mafruz, who lights the world, right? And there are for doing this, he first comes to Zolamat, which is where he is. Zolamat, the cow is, the bull is. I'm sorry. And he sees that it's too dark, so he is Ala Mafruz himself, right? He's the light of the world. But anyway, he goes up and brings down the torch, which is here rendered as, also lighting figures, one hand down, one hand up, just like the Ṭabarī, and he is slaying the bull, right? Of course, this is, yeah. And I argue that this, I'm sorry. Why am I not going up? Okay, it's not. All right, I need to go down, but somehow this has stopped on me, and it's very important that I show you the rest of it. Okay, let me stop sharing my screen for a second, and I read from, okay, I want, yes, I want this one. One thing that I forgot to tell you is to tell you that okay, sorry. Okay, here. Yeah, there was something I forgot to tell you, but now I forget. Oh, okay. This is a rendition of this, right? A rendition of the Ṭabarī, I argue, right? Not exactly the same, of course not, late edition, of course, yes, but, this is, except for the rest of the Ṭabarī, this is the main scene of Ṭabarī, right? But I want to leave you with two passages, right? One from Ibn Qutayba, and that is, oh, incidentally, when we are talking about Mazdakites, I forgot to tell you one very important point, and that is the fact that Ibn Qutayba talks about the Mazdakites. He uses when he's talking about the Mazdakites, he uses the word ʿayyār. Shaki had very perceptively recognized this, that he's using the term ʿayyār, but he didn't, he didn't pursue it, right? But we have that, right? That at least in one occasion they are called ዐyyārs, right? And anyway. So this is Ibn Qutayba, what he says. Let's start with Ibn Qutayba. And they said that God has given the riches of the world to be shared equally by his worshippers. But the people did wrong to each other, and some appropriated the property of the others. And we divide them. He's talking about the Mazdakites, of course. And we divide them among the people and return to the poor what is theirs by right from the property of the rich. And they began to take possession of and lay hands on the houses and women and property of the people. The people, I argue, for the most part, here are the Khurramdins and those who are in sort of cahoots with them. But one other thing that I have to tell you, these were desperate times, right? There was drought, there were earthquakes, there were plagues, not in Iran, plague not, but all the rest in Iran. Desperate times, yeah. I mean, for, drought had continued. We have in the Khudai Nāmeh tradition, for drought continues for 7 years. But this is said across foreign as well as Iranian and quote unquote Islamic. Well, in the case of Ibn Qutayba and so, you can call them Islamic, I guess. So these are desperate times, right? And here comes Shapur Razi with an army, right? An army in which in Samak Ayyār we read the following. Arman Shah, and you remember, you have to recall that James Russell has already argued that, in fact, what they call Roman Mithraism came from Armenia, right? Okay, that's one. But anyway, Armenia and Iran are like this, but I believe it's Iranian. But anyway, so here we have Ibn Qutayba's passage in its Iranian setting. Arman Shah has no brains, Samak says, or one of the ʿayyārs says. He does not know that the very foundation of the world has been set thus. No one brings riches into this world, once given birth by a mother. All is procured through positions. It is usurped, stolen, and devoured until one is made king through the resources of the people. Sort of the story of our world, right? The wise know that this is the affair of the world, right? So I leave you at this. I hope I have communicated to you why I think the Mazdakites were Mithraists movements, merrymaking, drinking wine, living together, and so on and so forth in desperate times, first against Sohra, but in desperate times, probably against all the other Parthian dynasts as well, right? And of course, that is what starts the reforms of Ghawat himself and the reforms of Khosrow and Nushirvan, the attempted reforms, let's say, because it was not, it ended up in the destruction of the Sasanians. But anyway, in this Mazdakite revolt, the Babak revolt, I believe, Beha Farid, those of you, I was friends with my late colleague, late and lamented, departed colleague, Patricia Crone. But because of the scandals that I told you, a lot of nonsense was created against oh, anyway. So I have read her work, and sufficient to say that there is a lot of information here. There is a lot of great information there, but Patricia basically is coming from the wrong perspective, was coming from the wrong perspective. I'm sorry that I'm sorry that she's not here to engage me, but I believe that she came about all these revolts and the Mazdakites and the Wabags revolt and all of that she viewed it from a, let's say, different prism than I do, and that's about it. All. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Parvaneh. I will immediately stop the recording to give time for questions and discussion.
Sure.
And just once more to remind everyone, we will have another talk also on Wednesday on Kashmir under Indian occupation, and then on Muslim difference next Monday. And yes, now I stop the recording, and the floor will be free.